So I'm delighted to be joined by Euan Phillips, who is a spokesperson from Labour Against Antisemitism. So Euan, thank you very much for your time. Obviously, this is part of a series of conversations we're doing about why Corbynism is so terrible. And if that kind of thing interests you, please do subscribe. I guess the place to start is, when was the first point you realised that Labour and kind of the British hard left more generally had a serious problem with anti-Semitism?
So I think for me personally, it was around the time of the second leadership election in 2016. So, I mean, the 2015 leadership election had obviously been a four-way thing. And at that point, I wasn't really so much aware of there being sort of online debate about it. But by 2016, I think I was a lot more sort of aware that, you know, there were large Labour groups where discussions were taking place online. And I basically joined things like the Labour Party Forum, which had, sort of 60,000 plus members on Facebook, and where people, would sort of debate and discuss various, political ideas, and basically during that time, obviously the main topic of debate was Corbyn versus Owen Smith, and that sort of rapidly turned into a basic hard left versus everyone else type of debate, and I think at that point it really became apparent how successful the sort of takeover of the Labour Party had been by certain elements, and that really was, certainly in terms of the election result, and it was during those sort of discussions and debates and sort of arguments that I saw how much sort of anti-Semitic views and anti-Semitic ways of thinking had sort of become part of the way that the Labour Party members argued online. And basically a lot of the people who I would find myself arguing on the same side of, were people who you'd start, having chats with, via direct messages and stuff like that. And it was just basically through that process that I gained a bit more sort of awareness about how much the issue of anti-Semitism had become a serious part of the Labour Party. So it was really the sort of Owen Smith leadership campaign which sort of brought a lot of concerned people together, and was really the point where we sort of started the process of reporting what appeared to be Labour Party members promoting anti-Semitic views and especially on things like Facebook, anti-Semitic images and links to anti-Semitic articles and things like that. So from my own personal perspective, it was probably around towards the end of 2016, and then at the beginning of 2017, we sort of formally founded Labour Against Antisemitism.
Yeah. You were a long-standing Labour activist. I mean, I think we were just speaking now, you were a constituency chair for the constituency Labour Party. I mean, it must have been quite a big, a shock to you to find out that the party that you've been, campaigning for and been part of for so long was having this issue of racism.
Yeah, I first joined the party in the mid-90s. I rejoined again around 2013. The sort of CLP that I was involved with up in North Wales, it was probably, a CLP like many others. There was a range of opinion, but that range of opinion was firmly within, it was broadly sort of soft left and then slightly sort of progressive left. And that's where but overall it was very much sort of, what can we do to support our MP and support our local councillors, and have a bit of a whinge about Conservative policies and basically hoping for the best when it came to the general election. There was certainly no, sort of fundamental and sort of quite toxic disagreements about all sorts of issues, which basically came in, around the time of Corbyn's election and then afterwards. It was only later that I sort of discovered that these kind of elements of the hard left and elements of sort of toxicity within the British left and within the Labour Party had been a part of the Labour Party's history for quite a long time, but had sort of ebbed and flowed in sort of power within the party at different points over the years, over the sort of century that the Labour Party's been going. So it kind of was a bit of a shock to see an organisation which I'd always felt was sort of fairly sort of fluffy and welcoming, suddenly become this sort of quite rancorous and bitter environment where people would be sort of be at each other's throats, especially online, where it was a real sort of no holds barred environment. And things basically just progressively got worse and worse from there. And that's certainly what's been catalogued over the last few years in terms of what's been coming out of the Labour Party, almost at sort of all levels, really.
Did you find the worst offenders were people that kind of came into the Labour Party with Corbyn? So once Corbyn became leader, they then joined, or they joined to help make Corbyn leader? Or is it kind of people who were members before who perhaps came radicalised, or some kind of combination of the two?
I'd say it was a combination of the two, to be honest. Yes, there were people who came into the party from the sort of hard left sort of socialist sort of SWP and those kind of organisations who came in. They found kindred spirits within the existing Labour Party who perhaps had been had not been so active or not been so vocal in their CLP meetings, but suddenly were sort of great. We can go back to the CLP meetings and have a row and all that kind of thing. I think a lot of members who wanted to be more sort of shift, whose politics were more towards the hard left, but recognised that those politics weren't electable, suddenly felt as if the sort of the lock had been unleashed and they were able to give voice to those views a lot more. And I think there was an underlying anti-Israeli settlement, which is sort of very closely symbiotically linked to anti-Semitism and casual and latent anti-Semitism, which basically was given sort of permission to emerge out into public view. So I think and I think that's the actual sort of dynamics of that will make a really interesting sort of sociology study at some point, and I think it's something that really will need to be understood by the Labour leadership moving forwards, that the anti-Semitism which we've seen from the Labour Party over the last 4 or 5 years, it wasn't something which came into the party and then can be just as easily taken out. It was a combination of both, and that's a far more challenging and far more sort of complex situation that Keir Starmer is going to find himself when he gets to sort of thinking, how can I seriously tackle this issue? Because he's going to have to seriously tackle it, otherwise the Labour Party can remain unelectable.
Well, I've spoken to a lot of Labour Party people, including people who worked in Labour HQ, who said that basically, the soft left completely underestimated the threat from the hard left, the far left. But they'd see kind of the Venezuela solidarity campaign at Labour Party conferences and kind of thing. They're a bit nuts, but it doesn't really do any harm. And they just didn't realise they were a serious political threat. I mean, do you think that's the case? Do you think there's a bit of naivety on the soft left, just how dangerous and how malevolent the part of the far left could be?
I think there was a lot of naivety. I mean, I certainly in 2015 was extremely naive about the threat of the hard left. In my CLP meetings, there were a couple of guys, a couple of sort of old timers who'd sort of been there since the early 80s, who sort of knew what Corbyn was about, and they sort of said, this guy he's had close links with the IRA, he's got some other views which are not good and are not constructive. And everyone was a bit like, oh yeah, okay, well he's an old firebrand, he's probably all this kind of thing, but he's going to come in and shake things up a bit, and maybe we need a bit of sort of more sort of hardcore socialist policies to challenge the Tories, and why not give that a go and see how it goes? And I think there was a lot of that sort of sense. I think once Corbyn was elected leader, I think quite a lot of the Labour members did start feeling a little bit sort of a sense of sort of disappointment with Labour MPs for not getting behind the leader. I think they themselves felt, well, look, we didn't necessarily back Corbyn, but he's the leader, we need to get behind him. And then after 2017, and Corbyn had apparently showed that he was, capable of getting closer to power than they thought, a lot of that sort of sentiment moved from being sort of, well, I'm a bit wary, but I'll get behind it, to full-blooded support for the Corbyn project. Was there a huge amount of naivety around some of the other things? I think there was probably a lot of sympathy for some of the positions that Corbyn took, and I think there was a broad sense of sort of that Corbyn was a bad thing because he was unelectable. But I think in the heart of hearts, a lot of Labour members, agreed with his position on being so vehemently anti-Israel. I think they were ready to accept his bizarre stories about talking to both sides in the Northern Ireland peace process, and I think, given the fact that there had been issues around media bias against Ed Miliband, they were then in a position ready to accept that accusations of anti-Semitism were a smear campaign, and they were able to take on that sort of position quite easily. And that's where you do sort of look at it as a sort of radicalisation of the Labour Party membership, not just the people who came into the party, but also the people who were already there, who had always been loyal to their leaders, even when the leaders did not share their politics, and felt it their duty to be loyal to the leader, once more.
Yeah, it's very interesting that the anointed Corbynite successor did not win the most recent Labour leadership. I mean, Keir Starmer is not a Corbynite, more of the soft left. But do you think that's because Labour membership kind of fundamentally realised that what Corbynism stood for was morally wrong, or is it just because they think it's unelectable and out of desperation they're turning to the centre left?
That's quite difficult to really identify at this sort of early stage. There will be a series of sort of indicators. For example, the next set of NEC member elections will give more of an idea about how bought into a sort of more modernising approach from Starmer the membership is. I think in terms of there having been a sort of moral wake up, I don't think. I'd like to believe that, but I don't believe that's correct. Maybe some people have sort of woke up on December 13th and sort of thought, "Oh my God, what the hell were we doing?" But I'm not really in the best position to sort of survey the thoughts of sort of 500,000 or so Labour Party members. I think it is obviously a positive that someone from the sort of broader left, rather than from the hard left, sort of continued as became Labour leader, and that is obviously a positive. And we in Labour Against Antisemitism are cautiously optimistic about the leadership of Sir Keir Starmer, if not overwhelmingly bought into it as yet. But I'm sure there have been some changes in the Labour Party. Some people did come back to the party to support Sir Keir Starmer. Other people came back to the Labour Party to support Euan Phillips, and I think that was quite important as well. But the degree to which the characteristics of the Labour Party membership have fundamentally changed is something which is, I think, still very much up for discussion and debate, to be honest.
Yeah. The main work of Labour Against Antisemitism, I think, was reporting. You'd find Labour members making anti-Semitic comments on social media, and then kind of report them to the party itself. But what kind of reaction did you get from the party from this? What was the? Did they regard you as an irritant, as a help? How did they treat you?
In terms of any kind of attempt of cooperation, we had practically zero. Our reports were sort of almost treated as a nuisance, and we were as if we were some kind of menace with dubious objectives and dubious political motivations. That was certainly the sense that we got through from the official channels. In terms of support from Labour MPs, with the exception of sort of people like Ian Austin, we got zero public support. We had a little bit of sort of background support, but again, that was virtually minimal. And while we continue to retain support from some people within the Labour Party, basically, I think there was a sense that once we said that we felt that the fight against Labour anti-Semitism was more important than the success of the Labour Party, then once that became clear that was our position, we were basically almost persona non grata with regards to the Labour Party, and that's every part of the Labour Party, including the sort of centre-left, right through to the hard left. It was really quite a instructive lesson about Labour tribalism and the degree to which, for many people in the Labour Party, their loyalty to the Labour Party outweighs and comes way before their loyalty to their country and to the people of this country and to what democracy should offer to people in this country. And I found that quite difficult to accept. And it certainly coloured my perceptions of the Labour Party and the people who work within it. And it's going to take a very, very long time for that impression that I've got at the moment to be healed, really.
That's really interesting, because I remember, I think it was right before the election, there was a Jewish news poll. It was something like 47% of British Jews would seriously consider leaving the UK, which is a horrific figure. But for any minority community, you have to go for that. And I remember kind of thinking about, why are the centre-left people in Labour still tolerating this? Do you think it is really just tribalism? They're so loyal to the Labour Party, but even though they consider, or they are anti-racist, they consider them as anti-racist, they care less about anti-racism than they do about the electoral success of the Labour Party. Do you think that's kind of the main problem?
I think there are a series of complex people have complex relationships with the Labour Party who are within the Labour Party itself, and obviously there are different factions within the Labour Party. I think some people were happy to keep their heads down and not take a position and just hope that the electorate would do the job for them of removing Jeremy Corbyn. I think it's actually pretty scandalous that Jeremy Corbyn survived basically 2 leadership elections and was allowed to contest 2 general election campaigns, and the Labour Party as a whole basically facilitated that. I think a large part of the centre-left preferred to fight the terrain on the issue of Brexit and just didn't want to engage in the issue of anti-Semitism at all. I think the soft left basically reconciled themselves with the Corbynite leadership after a better than expected electoral performance in 2017. I think the one sort of faction that really did fight really hard was the sort of Labour First guys. They really put in a huge amount of work, and I always have a huge amount of respect for Luke Akers and the work that he did. And obviously the hard left were always pro Corbyn as well. But we can look at various motivations and various reasons why certain MPs were maybe playing a long game and all that kind of thing. But the fact is that some MPs saw what was happening and took a moral decision to leave. People like Joan Ryan and Ian Austin and Lishana Berger. And others felt that they could live with it and that they would risk on the less of general election outcomes that the British electorate would do the job that they should have done and get rid of Jeremy Corbyn. And the fact that they sort of relied on us to do that work without really supporting us or sort of giving us any thanks or really sort of acknowledging the work that we did when they kept their heads down. It's something which is pretty disappointing, to be honest, considering the Labour Party is supposed to be an anti-racist organisation, and is supposed to stick up for people who basically face down large organisations which are essentially dysfunctional, which the Labour Party is. Yeah.
One of the things that really shocked me, it didn't surprise me that there was increases among the hard left and far left. It surprised me how the extent to which the soft left were prepared to, I mean, with, as you say, lots of honourable exceptions. I mean, the New Statesman, I think, for example, didn't endorse Labour because of the anti-Semitism. But a lot of the soft left still did. So, I mean, the Guardian did. Obviously, pretty much all Labour MPs campaigned to make Corbyn Prime Minister, who are still Labour MPs in December 2019. I mean, sort of soft left comedians, all these sort of people who, claim to be fierce anti-racists, and, claim they care huge about this kind of stuff. When push came to shove, they're prepared to back a candidate who a significant majority of the British Jews regard personally as an anti-Semite. I mean, did that surprise you? The kind of the tolerance from the soft left?
By the time we got to the election in December 2019, no, I wasn't surprised in the least. I mean, I was surprised at the degree by which Labour MPs kept their heads down, because, ultimately their objectives are to retain their seats, and they hadn't done anything in the preceding 4 years, or very few of them had. And so, there was certainly nothing surprising about their behaviour. In terms of the other elements of the Labour Party, I mean, once you get attacked for not having the Labour Party's best interests at heart, once you get accused of being a racist and a Netanyahu supporter, for basically, drawing attention to anti-Semitism from people within the soft left again, you sort of lose any kind of sense that they understand anti-racism. And I mean, there was quite a lot of sort of displacement activity. There's quite a lot of virtue signalling. You find, one of the things which I found was that a lot of people across the left suddenly understood anti-Semitism when it applied to Chris Williamson, and there was almost a sort of moment last year where Chris Williamson became the acceptable bogeyman who everyone could call out and say, needs to be expelled from the Labour Party, and he almost became the sort of the fall guy for the entire issue of anti-Semitism across the Labour Party. And I found it quite. Again, it was not surprising, but it was fairly indicative that a lot of people who in sort of February 2019 were saying Chris Williamson should be kicked out of the Labour Party, in November and December 2019 were saying elect Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister of this country. And it was just, I mean, from my perspective, it was just an interesting way in which people are able to sort of displace their feelings about something into one area, as a way of sort of compartmentalizing their relation to something else. If you sort of try to engage them on the sort of question of why they're supporting people like John McDonnell, who attended, for example, the Open Labour conference, didn't get asked about his relationship with the Labour representation campaign, of which he's president. We try and engage these people in conversation. They just sort of accuse you of having of coming from a position of bad faith, of undermining the left, undermining the Labour Party, and it was, as I say, it was just really disappointing to see that kind of that sort of way that people reconciled those two positions, all for the sake of maintaining their own position within the Labour Party and protecting the Labour Party, because they obviously felt their identity was so deeply entwined with that of what is essentially, which is basically just, it's a political organisation which is designed to be a body that operates the government. It is just a thing. It's not some kind of supernatural, emotional being that we should all bow down before. It's just one of two parties who is likely to form a government. So it was very disappointing. It was very instructive. It was very illuminating, the degree to which people could quite easily shift from being, vehemently denouncing Chris Williamson one week and then the following week getting behind the most anti-Semitic political leader in post-war British history, at least of a sort of, of one of the two mainstream parties. It wasn't surprising in the least, but it was very disappointing.
Chris Williamson, that's very interesting. I can't think of much that Chris Williamson's done that Corbyn himself hasn't done. I mean, I always kind of thought that what Chris Williamson was up to at any given time was a pretty good guide to the sort of thing Corbyn would be up to if he wasn't Labour leader. I mean, and there are some things that Corbyn has said which are, in my view, truly horrific. So obviously, after he invited Raed Salah, I might mispronounce that, but the libel shade, obviously invited him to Parliament, said he was a great representative of his community, and heaped him with praise, despite the fact this guy is a ferocious anti-Semite. But then when he got banned from the UK, Corbyn then blamed the Zionist lobby, which I thought was, that's Chris Williamson level bad. And stuff like, blaming Israel based on no evidence whatsoever for jihadi attacks in the Sinai, obviously the Jewish irony thing. I mean, I can't think that there's very much. I don't know if you can. I can't think of very much that Williamson's done that Corbyn hasn't done.
No, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn had a lifetime as an anti-Israel, as basically an anti-Semitic, as anti-Israel activist. We submitted a complaint about Jeremy Corbyn to the to the compliance unit of the Labour Party, and it was a list of 21 different points, and that only went back as far as 2008. I mean, if we'd gone back to the time he entered Parliament in 1983, look, I have no idea how long that list would have been. He spent a political career basically bogged down in an anti-Semitic worldview. But the discussion around Corbyn was like, oh well, obviously it's disappointing that he's sometimes been close to this views, but he's a pro-Palestinian activist, so that's okay. I think because Jeremy Corbyn read out this speech, which didn't really convince anyone who took this thing seriously that he was going to try harder to tackle anti-Jewish racism, and therefore he's moving in this direction. It's like, well, come on, guys, how gullible are you? And then after a while, you start realizing, well, they're not gullible. They are taking on board a series of messages which is aligned with how they want to see the world and how they like to see their political party operating, which is really outside of really what could be considered to be authentic and genuine and credible. But Jeremy Corbyn basically earlier this week denounced the HRC as a tool of the Conservative government. Just the kind of conspiracist thinking that he's always promoted throughout his career. And he shouldn't be in the Labour Party. He should have been kicked out of the Labour Party by Tony Blair. And to my mind, it's an example of how one of the great failings of the centre-left and the soft-left in British politics has been its failure to police its border to the left and has always indulged the hard left and has always said, "Oh, these people are a valid part of our political body." And at some point, and hopefully at some point, Jeremy Corbyn will be kicked out of the Labour Party, and the message will be sent that people with those politics aren't welcome in a mainstream political organisation. And I'll be really happy when that day comes, and hopefully it will, because that will be the moment that I'll be convinced that the Labour Party is ready to be serious about government again.
Against Corbyn. What actually happened with that complaint? So it seems to me pretty clear that Corbyn has personally, according to the International Holocaust Remembrance definition of anti-Semitism, Corbyn has violated that on several occasions. That seems beyond reasonable doubt to me.
Yeah, and when we submitted that complaint, we contextualised it with the IHRA definition as well. In fact, that's what we do with pretty much all our complaints, because the guys in the compliance unit weren't necessarily up to speed on what the IHRA definition meant, how it should be understood, and certainly weren't receiving that kind of training, as far as I can tell, under Jenny Formby. But yeah, so basically what happened was we submitted the complaint. We in a separate conversation, and I was having a chat with a journalist and mentioned that we'd done this, and the journalist said, okay, we would like to write a story about that. And as a consequence of that, rather than dealing with the content of the report itself, the Labour Party wrote to us and said, look, we're not going to engage in this, because it's clearly a publicity stunt. But, well, you've got to deal with the content of the report. I'm sorry that we brought the views of the leader of your party into the public domain, but how about you actually deal with those 21 points which we've raised? But that was absolutely typical. They were sort of pushed aside or whatever. It was incredibly disappointing, and it was an ongoing campaign of gaslighting where we were putting in reports and being told, and in the public, in press articles, they probably say, yes, we deal with it, and we knew they weren't dealing with it. We knew it was all it was pretty much a nonsense, but that's what we were engaged in over the last few years.
And could you resubmit that complaint now? Not for the press, so there's no excuse for not looking at it seriously. If that was to happen, would you think they would be judged fairly?
One of the things which we sort of commented on earlier this week was that since Keir Starmer's come back in has been elected as Labour leader, there has been evidence that some people are being suspended. Some suspensions are turning into expulsions, which is great. But we submitted, hundreds of reports, and a couple of expulsions and suspensions each week is not going to do the job. When Keir Starmer was running for leader of the Labour Party, he said that he was going to implement a independent complaints unit, and he hasn't done that yet. Now, he's got his General Secretary, great, fantastic appointment, David Evans, brilliant, really good choice as General Secretary. So now he's got the General Secretary in place, he's got the power, he needs to implement an independent complaints process. And when that happens, I think that's when we'll feel more comfortable maybe resubmitting those kind of complaints which we dismissed out of hand. Because, at the moment, it's still a politicised complaints process. It's not to standards, it's not up to spec. And I appreciate that Keir Starmer might be waiting for the Equalities and Human Rights Commission report to come through, and hopefully that'll come through shortly. But to be honest, there's nothing preventing him doing this now. And, we do kind of wonder why he seems to be dithering over implementing this thing which he committed to numerous times.
Yeah. Do you think the HRC report could be like a turning point? It will kind of give Starmer the ability to really go after the hard left if it concludes that there was kind of serious structural pieces in Labour during the Corbyn years?
I hope it will be a turning point. Obviously, there's still a little bit of obviously there's a huge amount of uncertainty about what kind of recommendations it's going to put in. There are basically two sort of things which need to be tackled. The first one is the sort of nuts and bolts of how Labour Party deals with anti-Semitism amongst its membership, and that needs to be challenged. The second one is really about the embedded culture of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. There has been a anti-Jewish, anti-Zionist, anti-Israel thread within the left, within the broader European, within the sort of international left since Marx, and that's a design flaw which under Corbyn in the UK became really an integral part of the Labour Party and really exists as a very significant part of the entire British left. So I hope that the HRC is going to find a way to tackle that side of things as well. But there's only, obviously there's only so much you can do. But again, I think it is disappointing that the Labour Party, and I think it is something which people within the Labour Party should reflect on, that it took organisations like Labour Against Antisemitism to basically find the time, effort, and financial resources to sort it out. Maybe at some point we'll get thanked for that by the Labour leadership for doing their job for them. But I feel as if we'll be waiting quite a long time. However, as I say, it is an issue that some people in the Labour Party should reflect on the fact that they weren't able to sort out their own racist mess, basically.
I obviously, like you, I spent some time, I'm sure not as much time as you did, but some time looking through far left Facebook and stuff. And some of the stuff I saw posted there was just incredible. I mean, it was content which could be copied. In fact, in some cases may have been copied, pretty much word from word from kind of neo-Nazi. Things about the Rothschilds inventing ISIS and the Rothschilds doing 9/11, Holocaust denial. I mean, just vile stuff. Where do you think this kind of anti-Semitism on the left actually comes from? Is it kind of like a mutated form of anti-capitalism? Is it about Israel? A combination of the two?
That's a really good question. I think there has been a link between sort of structural analyses of capitalism and sort of global conspiracy theory, which sort of ties together with anti-Semitism, and that's been a significant part of how the left looks at the world. Obviously for a very long time. People on the left have brought in their own anti-Semitic views. I think there's anti-Semitism exists within Western European culture anyway, and has done for centuries. I think if you look at some of the exchanges of views around the creation of Israel under the Attlee government, you see that there were a significant number of anti-Semitic views from senior figures within the Labour Party, including, they suggested, Clement Attlee himself. And there has always been this sort of sense that that there has always been a sort of left-wing anti-Semitism in certain parts of the British left, over the last century and into this century. It sort of mutates and draws on existing events as they happen and changes. And I don't know if you've read either of the books by Dave Rich or by David Hirsch. And if anyone watching this hasn't read those books, I would really recommend them because they're so important. This sort of left-wing anti-Semitic worldview has been a significant part of the British left for quite a long time. And basically, the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn took something which was already growing in momentum in British academia and among trade unions, and just pulled it straight into the mainstream culture. But I think, as I said before, if anyone thinks that anti-Semitism in the Labour Party began on the 23rd of September 2015 and ended on the 13th of December 2019, then they are kidding themselves about how easy it's going to be to tackle this problem. It's fairly deep rooted, and it's almost part of the DNA of the British left, it needs to be looked at seriously rather than just sort of consigned to a working group and basically just considered as something else to be getting on with while other thing, the Labour Party decides to focus on something else. It's a significant part of the Labour Party as it is at the moment, and I don't think Keir Starmer is going to ignore it, but I'm sure that the Labour Party would like to ignore the issue as much as it can, because obviously it will take up bandwidth and take up time and resource which you would prefer to spend on beating the Conservative government. But as I said before, until it deals with the anti-Semitism, it's not going to become re-electable to the British people.
On the anti-Semitism, I guess the two things that really scare me about Corbynism, and I kind of group them together under sort of suspicion about Western liberal democracy or not fully adhering to Western liberal democracy, is a certain sympathy or ambivalence about political violence, and even sometimes a certain ambivalence or about democracy itself. So on political violence, when you've got John McDonnell praising the bombs and the bullets of the IRA, saying rioters who smashed up the Tory HQ, or I think in his words, beat the shit out of the Tory, kick the shit out of the Tory HQ, were the best in our movement. And there's countless examples like that. And when that kind of attitude to political violence is so entrenched, and then you combine that with so many people, senior Corbynites, having sympathy with dictatorial regimes, so being involved in the Cuban Solidarity campaign, of Venezuela Solidarity campaign, which apologised for two dictatorships respectively. People like Andrew Murray calling for the solidarity of North Korea. It seemed to me that there was a wider issue than just anti-Semitism, and it was kind of about almost rejecting liberal democratic values. I mean, do you think that there should be a firm rule in the Labour Party that if you're not clearly a Democrat and if you're not clearly opposed to political violence, you should be expelled? That should be kind of the line of acceptability.
I mean, I think there are already sort of rules within the Labour Party rule book, which sort of sets out those sort of values. It has always been clear that the Labour Party exists to win power through parliamentary democracy. And that is, that was a fundamental reason for the founding of the Labour Party. And how it defined itself in the sort of 1920s and 1930s, when obviously there were a number of different sort of left-wing groups vying for ascendancy. The Labour Party differentiated itself by saying, we're not going to look at extra parliamentary activity. We look specifically at achieving socialism through governments and through gaining democratic mandate. I think the issue is that over the last 4 years, 5 years, that part of the Labour Party rule book was sort of, not necessarily given as much priority as it should have been, and that's basically because the people in charge of the party, were people who, as you say, were fairly ambivalent about armed protest and terrorist activity, who don't come from a tradition of Western liberal democracy, and the fact is that these people shouldn't be in the Labour Party, and they shouldn't have got anywhere near power. Now, what I hope, what I want to see happening, is the Labour Party learning the lesson not just of the last 5 years, but also the lessons of the 1980s and previous lessons as well, and start being a lot more conscious about the fact that entryism is a real threat to its viability as a party of government. If there needs to be a change to the Labour Party rule book and to the constitution of the Labour Party, whatever it is that's required, then maybe that's what needs to be done. But I'd certainly welcome that. But will it happen? How keen is Keir Starmer to fight? A couple of battles. He's. I'm not sure how ready he is to really sort of bare his teeth and really sort of go to war with a significant part of the Labour Party membership. I'd like him to. I think that kind of thing is maybe part and parcel of dealing with the anti-Semitism as well. But it's a case of wait and see. And the thing, as I said with Keir Starmer, we are cautiously optimistic that he's going to do the right thing. But for all his positive steps, there have been some serious missteps. And hopefully he can take more positive steps moving forwards than he has done the missteps which have characterised some of his early decision making.
I mean, it always seems to me that there will be kind of bounds for expulsion. Because, I mean, not just on the anti-Semitic stuff, but also, I believe Corbyn once ended and spoke at a Communist Party fundraising rally. Obviously, some of his closest allies, like Andrew Murray, very, very recently ex-Communist Party people. And my understanding is that supporting another political party whilst you're a member of the Labour Party goes against the rule book. I mean, my kind of wonder is eventually that Corbyn is probably going to return somewhat to his roots. I mean, there's already indications of that. On this Saturday, for example, he's doing a Stop the War Coalition live stream with some pretty dodgy people. I kind of think that eventually Corbyn will force Starmer to act, or that's my hope. Corbyn will say something ridiculous and almost force Starmer's hand. I mean, do you think that's the best hope?
I think we've seen signs from a number of prominent figures on the hard left that they are basically goading Keir Starmer into suspending them, basically marshalling them, and I think a lot of them have got their eye on a potential general election defeat in 2024. At which point the myth of the close-run general election of 2017 will come into play. The whole legend around how that was lost and the proximity, which some people have fairly thoroughly debunked, the proximity of Jeremy Corbyn to Downing Street, 2,500 votes, etc. And I think actually quite a lot of the hard left think that the period after 2024 is an opportunity for them to regain control of the Labour Party. And I think the more that they can show that they have been penalised and ostracised by Keir Starmer in the meantime, so much the better. But equally at the same time, Keir Starmer has signed a pledge to say that if a Labour Party member, whoever that person is, supports or shares a platform with someone who's previously been expelled or suspended by the Labour Party, then they should also be suspended. He signed up, he committed to that pledge. We'd like to see that. I think we'd all like to see that pledge embedded as in the Labour Party rule book. But he has to make good on that commitment, which means when you have people like Diane Abbott apparently sharing platforms with people like Tony Greenstein and Jackie Walker, then okay, first time, a bit of a slap on the wrist and strong words said. But the next time it happens, they really do need to. There needs to be some action, and there needs to be suspensions and expulsions. The time for sort of taking a soft line on this kind of thing is a long way overdue. There needs to be some really strong action that says, look, these actions are not acceptable in my Labour Party. They're not acceptable to the British electorate. You're the reason why we lost the last election. You're really probably the reason we lost 2 elections before that as well. We don't need you anymore. Get out of the Labour Party. But as I say, my experience of the courage of the Labour Party over the last 4 years, is fairly low and fairly pessimistic. So, we'll have to obviously wait and see.
Would it be fair to say that, the Corbynism is an institutional anti-Semitic movement, or even an anti-Semitic or racist movement itself? Do you think that'd be a fair description of overdoing it?
Sorry, I didn't understand it.
Do you think it'd be fair to say that Corbynism is an anti-Semitic movement, a fundamentally racist movement, or is that overdoing it? I guess kind of linked to that. Do you think the Labour Party became institutionally racist under Corbyn's leadership?
Yes. It did. It brought a sort of certain viewpoint into the mainstream. It triggered latent anti-Semitism among huge amounts of the membership. I think there have been. David Collier did a really good investigation which showed how Labour Party members who 5 years ago, didn't give 2 hoots about what was happening in Israel, were suddenly, filling their Facebook pages with images that were basically anti-Semitic representations of Israel and Israeli policies. I think in terms of the way that the many and the few sort of concept was really sort of getting quite close to a sort of anti-Semitic analysis of economics, of our economic structure. I think that foreign policy was geared around a sort of anti-US, anti-Israeli worldview, which was again sort of fairly anti-Semitic as well. And I think moving away from that is going to be a real challenge for Keir Starmer. How is he going to shift a policy which basically centres Israel as the most important and powerful country in the Middle East into something which actually resembles real life and the complexity of international relations? How is he going to achieve that? He's trying to recover a centre-left political organisation from one which is, as I'm sure the HRC is about to confirm, institutionally anti-Semitic. And that kind of surgery isn't that easy. It took the Met Police a long time to move on from Stephen Lawrence. A lot of people in London, a lot of members of the black and minority ethnic community would maybe argue that there's still significant issues around racism in the Met, although it is, obviously it's also much improved as well. And how is Keir Starmer going to move the Labour Party on from what was a deeply anti-Semitic movement? And the other thing as well, I mean, we talk about Corbynism and we talk about the Labour Party as the only part of the British left. But there's a much wider ecosystem that makes up the British left. We look at all the, look, for example, at trade unions, the big trade unions that are affiliated to the Labour Party, who have seats on the NEC. Each one of those is affiliated to an organisation which is itself been shown to be deeply anti-Semitic, the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. You look at the sort of ideas factory of British academia, which sort of trains the sort of young activists which come into the Labour Party, which provides the ideas for the left and for the Labour Party. I mean that the left in academia is equally problematic. There were a lot of people who were signing those letters in support of Corbyn and dismissing anti-Semitism as a smear, who were university professors, and that's something which organisations like the UCU, which itself has got a pretty appalling record on tackling anti-Semitism, needs to have a look at. You have a look at where, I mean, from my own perspective, when we had a story about a high-profile Labour Party person engaging in anything to do with anti-Semitism, the last place that we called was The Guardian and the Daily Mirror, because they just would not carry any of our stories. We basically went to the Times, were fantastic, Telegraph, Daily Mail, Daily Express, etc., etc. Now, obviously that feeds into an idea about left-right representations of the issue, but I found it really disappointing that The Guardian, which is supposed to be not related to the Labour Party, which is supposed to be fairly objective, wasn't interested in carrying stories about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. They did it occasionally. They did a pretty good one in 2017, which I contributed to. But in terms of actually breaking news stories about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, The Guardian was pretty much nowhere. There are some good opinion writers, but there are some pretty awful opinion writers as well. So there's also this issue around the sort of left, the mainstream left-wing media as well, which is incredibly difficult. It's anti-Semitism on the left is much broader than just the Labour Party. It's a really sort of dangerous and quite disturbing interaction between a range of different bodies, which basically constitutes the British left. And all of these have have got issues around anti-Semitism within them. It's really concerning, and it's going to take a huge amount of leadership. And as I say, I don't really know where that's going to come from. And even talking about it makes me feel really, really depressed. But I mean, it is a problem. All those guys on the NEC who are on trade unions are all affiliated to the PSC. It's like it's just it's just really, really, really bad that it got to this sort of stage.
One final question. I mean, there are a lot of people on the centre left, like yourself, who've made huge personal sacrifices for anti-Semitism. And I'm thinking particularly of some of the MPs. Obviously, there are a handful of MPs who basically lost their jobs. In the cases of Luciana Berger and Louise Ellman, were arguably bullied out by anti-Semites. But there was a kind of a wider group in Austin. It's probably, I don't know, at least half a dozen MPs who basically surrendered their careers to try and fight anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, which I think is incredibly courageous, even if I don't share their politics on every issue. I mean, is there not a very strong case for Keir Starmer to try and bring them back into the Labour Party and to give them seats in the next general election to kind of try and right that wrong?
I mean, I think there are people who were fairly courageous who absolutely should be back in the Labour Party. And no, Luciana Berger, Louise Ellman, absolutely 100%. Ian Austin, I don't know whether he would be prepared to think about rejoining the Labour Party. I think all of them would want to see a lot more evidence than is currently being shown by Keir Starmer that things have changed. I think one of the things which Keir Starmer started doing is, for example, placing local Labour parties into special measures. I think he's done that with one up in Liverpool and reportedly also Hastings and Rye, although that's still to be confirmed, I think. There are a lot of CLPs across the UK which should be placed in special measures. Would it be great if these people were able to come back? Yeah, but I mean, I would fully understand if they said no, not while the party is as it is. I think there are MPs who lost their seats, who should be found a way back for. I think Anna Turley, who was really good and was very supportive regarding tackling anti-Semitism. She basically lost. One of the reasons she lost her seat was because she was fighting a legal action against Walkbox, which was being backed by Len McCluskey and Unite, allegedly. She was having to fight on two fronts. It's just absolutely appalling kind of behaviour. And she should be. If she wants to come back to the Labour Party, she should be given priority at the next, the next by-election or whenever the next opportunity comes along. And I think the door should definitely be open for people like Luciana Berger. I know she fought an election as a Lib Dem candidate. Well, guess what? A lot of Labour Party members vote for the Lib Dems, me included. So, that's just something that the Labour Party is going to have to suck up. And, as I say, it would be a really good sign that another good sign that it's learning its lessons and is ready to reflect on the last 4 or 5 years. If it started making moves towards that. And I'd certainly hope that if they did return, that they would be given prominent roles in sort of advising Keir Starmer on his strategy in terms of tackling anti-Semitism, because those guys have been at the coalface and, they deserve to have been treated a lot better than they were.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure. It's been really interesting. And thank you very much for your time. So